Okay, so let's go through this one a little quicker because we've got 10 questions to get through. We are doing 3.3, and as always, we start with a main idea line. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start mentally blocking off some of these prepositional phrases because, my God, there are a lot. In, that's a relationship word. A relationship word is a preposition. So, in is my preposition. Looking for a noun, August. Okay, so I know that's a dangly. It's not going to be part of my main subject and verb that I'm looking for. The students at is a relationship word. That makes it a preposition. So, at what? At Greenway. So, if it asks you what preposition matches Greenway, you're going to tell it at. If it asks you what preposition matches August, you're going to tell it in, because these are the phrases. So, the students, because I'm kind of discounting these things because they're prepositional phrases, the students sleep on their desks in the morning. So, on their desks in the morning. So a couple of more prepositional phrases. So that leaves me the students sleep. What's the action? Sleep. Do I have anything that changes me on the timeline? No. Who sleeps? Students. So students sleep. Now I can start placing these descriptions. The students. Now I have in August. Does that describe the students? They are in August students. Or does that describe the sleeping? The sleeping happens in August. Well, that's in August. So this prepositional phrase is describing sleep. Always put an angle bracket when you have a preposition. The relationship word or preposition goes on the slant. The noun goes on the flat. Next. On their desks. Does on their desk describe students? They're on their desk students. Or does it describe the sleeping? Well, clearly it describes the sleeping. On desks. Always put the preposition on the slant. Put the noun on the flat. And then on their desks. And then in the morning. Does in the morning describe the desks? Does it describe August? Does it describe how they sleep? What does in the morning describe? Well, it describes sleep. So each of these things individually is describing the sleep. The sleep happens in August. The sleep happens on their desks. The sleep happens in the morning. Each of these individually modifies sleep. So I'm done, right? One of the things some of you guys is doing is you're not double checking that you have every single word from the diagram diagrammed. So if you notice, at Greenway is not on there yet. So, at Greenway, does that describe students or does that describe the sleep? Well, it's the students at Greenway sleep. It's describing the students. So what kind of students are they? The ones at Greenway. Okay, let's try the next one. The 3 students in Miss Canaday's room at Greenway have been studying for 2 hours. Always look for main idea. So, I am right off the front seeing the verb, which means I can diagram the verb, studying. Do I have any helping verbs that change where we are on the timeline? Yes, I have 2 words that move us into the past. Can you spot them? Have been. Have been studying. That is my verb. So now I am looking for my noun. Who has been doing this? Well, that is students. So students have been studying is my main idea. Now I can start placing things. Well, that's the students. 3, it's describing how many students. So that goes there. In Miss Canaday's room at Greenway. Okay, we have in Ms. Canaday's. Now, a lot of times students are going to be like, well, that's a person. Well, it would be if what we had was Ms. Canaday, but what you have is Ms. Canaday's. If I say Ms. Canaday's car broke down, nothing on my body broke. What broke was my car. So when you say Ms. Canaday's, that is a description. That's whose car it is. But the noun would be car. Ms. Canaday's car. So Ms. Canaday's is not a noun. I'm still looking for a noun. In Ms. Canaday's room. There's my noun. At Greenway. At is a relationship word. Looking for a noun. Greenway. So if it asks you, what is the preposition that matches room? Well, that would be in. Okay, so the students in Miss Canaday's room at Greenway. How are we going to diagram this? So, in Miss Canaday's room, does that describe the students or the studying? Well, it seems to describe students more. We're talking about what students? Well, the students in Miss Canaday's room. So on the flat, we put the preposition, the relationship word. On the slant, we put the preposition. On the flat, we put the noun. And then, please do not do this where you're doing this weird line towards. Don't do that. No. Have a full line underneath Ms. Canaday's. The 3 students in Miss Canaday's room at Greenway. What does at Greenway describe? Describe students? Well, not really. There's a better answer here. And that is, it's describing where the room is. So let's make that a little bit longer so that I can say that where's the room? The room is at Greenway. Have been studying for 2 hours. 4 is my preposition. 2 is not a noun. Hours is a noun. So that's my whole phrase. So these are the 2 words that are working together. For 2 hours, does that describe students? No, they're not students for only 2 hours. The studying is only 2 hours. So angle bracket, relationship word, also known as a preposition, noun, and then that word in between that describes the noun. That is your diagram. Are you guys ready to try another one? Will you study for Ms. Canaday's test on prepositions? I seriously hope the answer is yes, but let's take a look. Will you study for Ms. Canaday's test on prepositions? What's the action? The action is study. Do I have any words that, I don't know, put me into the future? Well, yes, when you're asking a question, where does your helping verb often land? Yeah, at the beginning. Will study. So that's a reference to a future action. Well, who is it that should be studying? You. So that's our subject. So now, for Ms. Canaday's test, what does Ms. Canaday's test describe? Does it describe you, that you are for Ms. Canaday's test? Well, that's just awkward. Or does it describe the studying, that the studying is for Ms. Canaday's test? Yep, those seem to match. So, angle bracket, always, relationship or preposition, noun, and of course, what describes the test? Well, it's not Mrs. Soddy-Bow's test, it's Ms. Canaday's test. Now, that leaves us with on prepositions. It is clearly a prepositional phrase because you have the relationship word and the noun. But what does on prepositions describe? The studying, the test, or you? Is it a test on prepositions? It is a study on prepositions, or is it a you on prepositions? Well, I think we can all agree that's a test on prepositions. So there you go. Hades' guests in the Elysium fields in the underworld waited patiently. So let's take a look. Now, I can spot my action pretty quickly, so I can put it in, waited. Do I have any verbs that help move that on the timeline to the future or the past? So do I have something like will waited, has been waiting, any of those helping verbs? Nope. So that's our entire verb. So now I need to know, what is the subject? Well, who is it that's doing the waiting? The guests. Why is it that Hades cannot be the noun? Because we don't have Hades. We have Hades. Yeah, it's awkward. But that means that this is not a noun, is it a description of what kind of guests? Hades' guests in the Elysium fields in the underworld. So we need to separate out where our prepositional phrase is. We have in, the, not a noun. Elysium, not a noun. Fields, noun. Now, I will tell you there are two ways to interpret this. You're either going to say this is the noun and this is a dangly, an adjective that's describing what kind of fields. Or some people are going to say this is all a compound noun, kind of like Ms. Canaday. You've got two words in there to make one noun. So some people are going to diagram this as a compound noun. I would count either one as correct. It's a matter of interpretation. But I'm looking for my other prepositional phrase because I have another relationship word, another in. So, Hades' guests in the Elysium fields in the, not a noun, underworld, noun. So I now have spotted where my two prepositional phrases are. I have Hades, guests, waited, and patiently. Patiently, I can diagram real quick. So now, in the Elysium fields, does that describe the waiting or the guests? Are they his guests in the Elysium fields, or are they waited in the Elysium fields? This is a little bit difficult to be able to kind of sort out, but in general, prepositional phrases come after the word that they are modifying. That's most common. Sometimes that can be moved, but oftentimes if that's moved, then you have commas that will show up. And here, there are no commas shown up, so I think it's more likely that we're looking at the guests that in the Elysium fields describes the guests. So I put in my angle bracket saying preposition. On the flat, I put the preposition, the relationship word. On the flat, on the diagonal is the preposition. On the flat is the noun. And then I can put in the Elysium. Now, what if I actually interpreted this as all one thing? Well, you could put Elysium fields up here on the flat, and then you would just have the word the dangling. I would accept either one as correct, but that still leaves you with one more. In the underworld, does underworld describe where we find these fields, or does it describe the guests, or does it describe the waiting? Well, it describes the field, where it is. In underworld, the. What is the preposition that goes with underworld? Well, that would be in. Okay, next one. Did Zeus's 3 children with Hera flee from the monster? Main idea line. I actually spot my verb real quick. The action here is flee. Do I have any word up front that would change where I am on the timeline? Remembering that since we have a question, we always have to look at the first word because questions often move a helping verb to the front. And the answer is yes, did flee. Did pins it more firmly to the timeline, saying it did happen, versus something like should, which is like, well, that might not have happened. So that is an effect on the timeline. So who is it that fled? Children. So now I have my subject and my verb. So now I can start placing my other words. Zeus's. Well, Zeus's describes children. Remember, if you have that possessive, it is not ever a noun. 3. There you go. 3. Children with Hera. The fleeing didn't happen with Hera. The having children happened with Hera. Preposition, noun. Did flee from the monsters. And from the monsters is how they fled. So, if the test asks you what is the verb, you are going to say did flee. If the test asks you what preposition matches monsters, you're going to say from. If the test asks you what would Zeus's dangle under, you're going to say children. It's going to ask you to describe what this diagram would look like. Okay, I started the next one. I found the subject and verb, which at this point you should be able to do, but I'm going to ask you the same question I always do. Is there any helping verb that changes where this verb sits on the timeline? Yes, there is, because we don't definitely have that action. We don't know if that action is going to happen or not, so that changes how firmly it attaches to the timeline. So what helping verb is there? Should sit. And of course, as we keep saying in English, helping verbs often get pushed to the front when there's a question. So dividing that up, that leaves us on the golden couch. Is it an on the golden couch Aphrodite, or is it an on the golden couch way of sitting? Well, it's that way of sitting, so this is where we're going to put it. Relationship word. Noun that ends the prepositional phrase, and then any descriptors that were in between those two words. So if it asks you, what is golden going to dangle under? You're going to tell it couch. If it asks you, what is the preposition that goes with couch? You're going to tell it on. Okay, so number 7, the monster with snakes for hair, that would be Medusa, fell into the raging river. So what is the action? Fell. Who is it that did the falling? Monster. Do you have any words that would change where this comes on the timeline? No. So there is your subject verb. So now let's get into the danglies. The monster is easy. The next thing we have is with. So we look for the object that goes with it. It's the very next word, with snakes. With snakes, does that describe monster or the falling? Well, it's monster. So we put in our prepositional phrase. Here's our preposition. Here's our noun. We then say for hair. Well, does for hair describe the snakes, the monster, or the fell? Well, it's not a for-hair monster. That's weird. That describes snakes. So since it describes snakes, it goes under snakes. For hair. Fell into the raging river. Into is a preposition. That's a relationship word. The, nope, raging, nope, river, there's my noun. So into the raging river is all going to work together. Does that describe the falling, or does that describe the monster? Well, it's not an into the raging river monster. That's weird. It's the fall. So Prepositional phrase, I always draw an angle line. Relationship word, into, also known as a preposition. The noun that matches it, river. And then any of the words in between that describe river, the, raging. Okay, this is a complicated one only because it's really long, and that means we've got to spot those prepositional phrases and get them out of the way. The signal fire on, ding ding, that is a relationship word, which means it's a preposition. I am now going to look for a noun. The, nope. Desolate, nope. Cliff, yep, a cliff is a noun. So that is my first prepositional phrase, on the desolate cliff. On, ding ding, relationship word. So let's get this out of the way. The, nope. Greek, nope. Isle, ding ding, an isle is an island, so that's a noun. On the Greek isle, burned throughout. Throughout, that is a relationship word. Throughout. The, nope. Night, yep. And hopefully you would recognize this is a word that's not describing anything directly, and it's paired with a noun. So even if you didn't recognize throughout as a preposition immediately, hopefully you would recognize that that phrase throughout the night is working together, which makes it a prepositional phrase. So what does that leave us with? The signal fire burned. Well, that makes it way, way easier. The signal fire burned. What's the action? Burned. Do you have any words that change where that falls on the timeline? No. What is it that actually is doing the burning? Fire. It's not the signal, it's the fire. Now we can start placing it. The signal. Fire. On the desolate cliff. On the desolate cliff. Does that describe the fire or how it burned? Well, it describes the fire. And it comes right after fire, which tells you it's more likely to describe fire than burned. Fire. On, preposition, noun, cliff. And now we've got the descriptive words. The, desolate, cliff. On the Greek isle. So on the Greek isle, what does that describe? Does it describe the fire? No, it's more likely to describe the cliff. And since that's the noun, it came right after, that tells us we're probably right. So prepositional phrase, on, be very careful, what's the actual noun? Isle, the Greek. Isle burned throughout the night. What does throughout the night describe? The fire or how it burned? Well, it comes right after burned, and logically it does seem to describe the burning. So, prepositional phrase, leave myself a little more room because throughout is a little bit longer. Night, the. Okay. So this is getting really long and I am trying to keep these videos pretty short. So let me just walk you through the last two. Okay, so let's get through these two real quick. Centaurs is what this sentence is really about. Fighting is the main verb, but have been puts us into past tense because it changes where you are on the timeline. It has to stay with it. So next we have some pretty simple adjectives to place. The three centers. Next we have in the forest. So does in the forest describe the centaurs or the fighting? Well, the fact that it's placed right after the centaurs means it's most likely intended to describe centaurs. On that distant island. Now, on that distant island could describe either forest or centaurs because it comes after each of those, but logically, which is it more likely to be connected to? Is it a forest on the island or is it centaurs on the island? Well, no, the centaurs are in the forest. The forest is on the island. So on is my relationship word. Island is the noun. That and distant are both describing island. Have been fighting for hours. For is your preposition. Hours is a noun. So we have a prepositional phrase that's describing the fighting. Any prepositional phrase I immediately put in my angle bracket. Relationship word or preposition. Noun. So if the computer asks you, what does distant dangle under? You're going to say island. If it says, what is the preposition that matches hours? You're going to say for. If it asks you for the verb, you're going to give it the entire verb, including these helping verbs. If it asks you for the subject, you're going to give it centaurs and only centaurs, because these words are danglies. So it's not part of the actual subject. So let's move on. We have Penelope happily knitted in the back room of the palace. So in this case, I can see the person that the sentence is about a lot easier than the verb. So it doesn't matter which side you start on. Penelope. What is Penelope doing? She knitted. Do I have any helping verbs that move me on the timeline? No. So that's my main idea. Penelope knitted. Now I can start placing my other words. Happily. Well, she happily knitted. So that's pretty easy to place. Now we have in the back room. Is she an in the back room Penelope, or is she in the back room knitting? In. Room. The back. That leaves you with of the palace. Is she of the palace knitting, or is she of the palace? That room is of the palace. Well, it's the room that's of the palace. So we have a prepositional phrase under a prepositional phrase. Of palace. The. Ooh, I'm running out of room, but I can fit it in. Okay, so that is what number 10 looks like. So at this point, hopefully you should be champions of the prepositional phrase. Couple of hints. Remember, the minute you spot a prepositional phrase, you should know that you have a relationship word up front, and that's your preposition. The phrase only ends when you have a noun in the back. That's actually called the object of the preposition. Not that you care, but it is. That's what it's called. And those are the two words that are going to go on that angle bracket. Don't angle it the way I angled it. That's a really bad angle. So those are the two words that are going to go on the angle bracket. The relationship word, the preposition, goes on the angle. The noun always goes on the flat. If you have words in the middle, then those words are going to be describing the noun. Okay? So they're going to dangle under the noun. This whole thing should be connected to whatever word on that it is describing. So prepositional phrases, they function either as adjectives or adverbs describing what is on top of the line. So of the palace is describing the room. In the room is describing the knitted. Go take your test.